All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started right now. And first of all, let me, for those of you who don't know me, first of all, welcome to our monthly industry expert webinar series. I think this is about our 12th now. We've been doing this for a full year, and the presenters we've had, the feedback has been fantastic. So welcome to this one. I'm really excited about it because I've known Taylor Freeman for 40 years, which we have both talked about. Like, it's hard to believe, and I'm really excited what he's going to be sharing about entrepreneurialism and his career. And I think that's going to be really enlightening, because I know a lot of people on here have, perhaps you've thought about going into your own business or being an entrepreneur, or perhaps you maybe just want to hear how somebody else did it, and you're going to get filled with some great information, great stories that I think will resonate to all of you. So again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jim Zasowski. I'm president and founder of Z1 Career Zone. And what we do here is we have built the most comprehensive career training program that exists. And I usually take 2 or 3 minutes to just give you a little bit of an update, a little bit of a business update. First of all, if you don't know about us and you want to know something about us, go to our website. It is rich with information. There are videos that take you through our online program. You can see exactly what it covers and all of that. But I got to share this with you. This week, we finished doing classes coupled with our online curriculum with a bunch of undergraduate students from Wofford College. So it was over a semester, 12 different sessions. We did that with them. And I got to tell you, I think I had the most fun of anything I have done in my career. And I think the reason for it is the students who went through our curriculum with us were so engaged, and we actually got to see the end result of that. And their feedback was just fantastic. And I'm just going to actually just read a couple of things of what they said. We finished it up last night. They already turned in their surveys, gave us feedback. And the reason why I want to share this is, here's why, and it's a reason why I put this thing together. And we talk about changing lives one career at a time. I absolutely believe that. And when we see that happening, whether it's undergraduates getting ready to graduate, whether it's recent grads who have been out for several months and still can't figure out, get that professional job. It could be professionals. Maybe you've been laid off. Maybe you just don't like what you're doing, which is, believe it or not, 71% of Americans in professional jobs, or you're transitioning from perhaps military to civilian world, okay? We cover all of those things. And honestly, for less than $1,000, you're getting a full semester course on exactly how to get into work, how to get the interviews that you want to get, how you get with the companies that you want to get into jobs that are rewarding and where you can thrive and where you can really enjoy it. So here's just a couple of quotes, and then we're going to get started. This is from those undergraduates at Wofford. I believe this program will be extremely beneficial for anybody that is a current student, especially juniors and seniors. I think the career development in college does not have an emphasis placed on it like it should, and rather the focus is on the classes we take day to day in our majors. This program focuses on exactly why we came to college in the first place, getting into a career where we could be excited about it. And I couldn't agree more. Here's another one. Not that many people know about all these wonderful tips on getting jobs or being prepared to enter the working force after graduation. I know I had no idea about anything. And believe me, that's the norm. That's not unusual. I have learned so much about interviews, personal brand, interview packets, etc. I know it put me ahead of a lot of my peers, and I feel that others can benefit from the same knowledge that I gained. I'd recommend this to anyone and everyone that I could. And I'll read one more here. And this one says, being surrounded by other students on a daily basis. I know for a fact that some of them know where they want to go, but not how to get there. The other half have a path, but don't necessarily know if that path is for them or not. I think this course is more than just building oneself professionally. It gives a chance for self-reflection and assessment. It gives a fresh chance to ask questions like, do I want to do this for me or for my parents? what are my core values? And is this what I am passionate about? It's a program that builds professionalism and individuality. So guys, this is, I mean, everybody that's out there, this is why we built this thing. It's to have an impact on people, right? And I know, and you know, that your career is everything. You spent over 100,000 hours in your career. Nothing comes a second close except for sleep. And so it's important to get it right. It's important to get it right as quickly as possible. And so I just wanted to share that. And so also make sure that you follow Z1 Career Zone. I know most of you on this are on LinkedIn, but we're also on, you know, if Instagram is your preferred social media method, great, you know, follow us there, or Twitter, or even Facebook, because we're now really putting out some great information, letting you know about these webinars that come up, which you're getting on either our email list or whatever. So thank you for being there. That's all I'm going to talk about, Z1 Career Zone. And now I'm going to introduce you to Taylor Freeman, who is our guest speaker. And like I said, I have known Taylor for 40 years, and I'm really excited to have him come on board, because he is one of these guys that when I met him, and I haven't said this to Taylor yet, when you meet him, you know you're meeting somebody special, and somebody that's going to do great things in life. You just know that it's there. You can feel it. You can see it. And so to know what Taylor's been through in his career, and I think is exceptional. And it's exceptional because he's like you and I, okay? He's gone through bumps and bruises. He's had to learn a lot of things, right? But he's going to talk about that. He's going to be very authentic about that. And I think a lot of you, I know I for sure, will see yourself through some of Taylor's stories. And my hope is that you know, you get a ton out of what he brings. Taylor lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and his wife, Deborah, is in Atlanta as well. You can hear a little bit more about Deborah later. He's got 2 beautiful daughters, married, he's got grandkids. He's got everything there. So, but I'll tell you, I am honored to know Taylor, and I'm honored to have Taylor have you on today. So we're going to do this interview style, and let me just go over a couple of things. You're going to see that your mic has been muted just to avoid disruptions through the webinar, but be sure to use the Q&A feature. If you have any questions or comments at any time during this webinar, I'm going to be collecting those questions. And when we're done, we're going to hopefully allow 10 to 15 minutes to answer those questions that came in. And if not, we'll get back to you on those. And we'll be sure to share those. And last, again, I already said that about, you know, follow us on one of these social media platforms. So this is going to be an interview style thing that we started doing several ago, and we've gotten some really good feedback on that. And so Taylor and I I'm just going to ask him some questions where I know that's going to lead into some great conversation and great stories.
Before you do, Jim, I've looked back on a lot of the different webinars you've done with different people, and you've always commented on, you know, the stuff that you've heard about them through LinkedIn and other things like that. And Jim had asked me if he could get that information, and after a couple of days, he couldn't find a thing. So I'm very unconventional in terms of how I've done things in my career, incredibly below the radar, to the extent that Jim, he said, Taylor, you got to give me a bio because there's nothing out there. It's a funny thing.
Well, put it this way. I know you well enough to know that I got a ton of respect for you and what you've done, and as a person too, and as a friend. So I'm going to get started off, and Taylor, really, you know, this first thing is just, I want you to just do a brief summary and share with everybody really kind of your journey, right? You know, over your career that you've taken, and perhaps, you know, what you've learned through that journey as well. And then we'll get into some other questions as we move along. Okay.
Okay. Well, let me start out, Jim, that, you know, I'm humbled and honored that you considered me for your webinar series, and surprised at the same time, because I look back at most of the people that you've had, and all way out of my league. You know, all of these, well, seriously, all these people, you know, they've checked all the right boxes. They've read all the right books. They've listened to all the right people, Zig Ziglar, et cetera. And, me on the other hand, I was a rebel early in my career, and that's kind of what dictated what I did. For example, my ADD, which is incredibly bad, I've learned much more about it later in my career, but it forced me to go to the cliff notes. I didn't read the book. I could network with the best of them, but I hated it. It was outside of my comfort zone. All the speaker series, it just didn't hold my attention. However, what did, and I learned this early in my career, was I found comfort in, strangely enough, movies, characters in movies, characters in novels, sports metaphors. And in a lot of ways, those things were I'm not going to say the driving force behind, my success, but, through the movies and the characters that I encountered, I learned a lot that I applied in my business on a day-to-day basis, and I firmly believe, that we're all actors on a stage performing in a play. And hopefully, we're the lead actor in our own play. And, you got to decide, who do you want to be? How do you want to carry yourself? Because over time, that's going to change and you've got to evolve, but constantly evaluate and self-reflect about that. And that will become important when we touch upon those pillars of success that you and I discussed. But, I remember a story, and I'm going to probably intertwine a couple of these anecdotal stories in there. And I think that's what really Jim enjoyed about my story. We knew each other early and reconnected about 25 years later through Denver. We had some commonalities there, and we were just catching up. And Jim says, "Well, Taylor, what are you doing?" And I kind of related, and I think I had retired from my company at that time, but I related to my story, and you were laughing the whole time because of many of the things that I encountered. So I think that's kind of what I'm going to be sharing tonight, and hopefully you'll still find them funny, Jim. But I remember a story about Cary Grant, and Cary Grant, a great actor, one of my favorite guys. And, this was a year or two before he died. And one of the reporters had asked him, say, Cary, who is Cary Grant? And he responded, I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be until I finally became that guy, or he became.
That's wild.
No, until he became me. And in reality, because we're all actors on a stage, I firmly believe we're growing, but we got to know who we are and how that is impacted by the people we encounter, what we're trying to do. Again, the movies, the metaphors, that's kind of a driving underlying influence in my career, as opposed to your tradition. I think one of the questions you were going to ask me in the end was, well, Taylor, tell me a couple of these great books that, influenced you. I don't have one, Jim. I'm going to lean more towards the movies, the characters. So obviously a very unconventional approach, possibly, to, the success that I've had in business. But what I'm hopefully going to be able to do is provide some type of a blueprint or a journey so that people can see that, when I hit a crossroad or came to a fork in the road, why did I take left versus right?
Right.
And I'm hoping that somebody in your audience can resonate with those crossroads that I encountered and finally come to the realization that, if that guy can do it, by God, I can do it. As an entrepreneur. That's what I'm hoping to some degree. If I can accomplish that, I'll feel good.
Yeah, and I think Taylor, what you're saying too is, which is why I was excited about this, is you're coming from a different place than a lot of people, right? And that's exactly part of understanding yourself, right? And what drives you, how do you learn, right? Versus what everybody else is telling you to do, so to speak, right? So,
but
so
maybe
let's
coming from a different place. I was at that place and I totally pivoted because that's what I was comfortable with, and it worked for me in the long term. So
yeah. Well, all right. So you touched on the 4 pillars of success, and we've talked about this a little bit, and it's something I definitely want to share with everybody because you live by this both personally and professionally, right? And you've set this up, and so I'd love for you to just walk through what those are, where they came from. Which movie they came from.
Well, I never thought about him a great deal until I was really preparing for this. And I think I was looking at a couple of your previous speakers, and one of your guys, he was fabulous. I think he was the automotive guy.
Yeah.
And he had 6 pillars, and I've got to be honest, he's just a hell of a lot smarter than I was. I had to condense it to 4. Just keep it simple. For me, keep it simple, stupid was one of the underlying principles to whatever I did. I didn't want to make it too complicated. And, I went from the corporate life to the entrepreneurial life, and I had to keep it that way because my success was in large part dependent on me, no one else. And that'll be one of the things I address in these pillars. But, so I had 4 to some degree. One is, you've got to identify a product or service that has differentiating advantages, the pluses that you can offer that allows you to create a want that satisfies the need. And most importantly in all that, you got to be passionate behind it. You're going to learn in my corporate career, I wasn't always passionate about what I was doing for a variety of different reasons. But when I went out on my own, I became that way. And that was a driving force, that passion behind identifying that product or service. And, so that's one pillar. Another one, a key to success for me was you had to find the financing that allowed you to have sufficient capital that you didn't make decisions in the short term that compromised your long-term goals. So there are a lot of people that start at businesses and they don't have any cash flow. They don't have any capital. And consequently, that's why they don't make it after 3 years or so. So you got to make sure that you have the capital so it doesn't impair your ability to make long-term decisions. Once you've got that in place, the third one for me was identifying people that were talented and committed and fully bought into the vision of what I wanted to accomplish. And that was key for me over the many years once I really went out on my own. And most of those guys, my key guys, stayed with me. Now, you got to pay them well. And in some cases, I offered stakeholder share. I gave them a % of that particular store that vested over a specific period of time, which kind of coincided with what my exit strategy was to begin with. But you got to have those types of guys so you're not constantly reinventing the wheel with employees, if you will. But with the type of business I had, car washes, you had a pretty fast revolving door. But my key guys stayed with me.
Yeah. And Taylor, I'm going to back up and gosh, I got so excited about just talking to you and get going. So, to put it in perspective, what Taylor's career was. Okay. So I first, literally met Taylor after he graduated college. He went to Washington Lee University. We were in the same fraternity. We worked for our fraternity headquarters together. And we lived in Evanston, this same house, and 13 guys. And we became very, very good friends and got to know each other extraordinarily well. And then after that, you went to basic training in the military. And then you worked for a bank in Baton Rouge where you grew up, right? And you did that for about 1.5 years, got married, and then spent the next 2 years back at Abbott Labs where I was. So we reconnected there.
Right.
And then from there you went to IDEX Labs, which was a veterinary diagnostic company for about 7 or 8 years, right?
Consistent with Abbott Labs. It was an extension of that, yes.
Extension of that. And so, and again, I'm sorry I didn't bring that up to give everybody context of where Taylor was. And then that's when he made the decision, right, to go off on his own, right? You're done with corporate America. Tell us about that, because that is, I think, and I do believe most people dream about going into their own business. Now,
well, let me do this. Let me kind of go back, and because there are a couple of funny stories in there that relate to each of those particular jobs, if you will. So you're right, Jim. We met at Sigma Chi. What a great opportunity. Jim was a phenomenal guy. You're obviously known as Jim now, but back then he was Zaz. And that's all we referred to him as. We would travel for 3 weeks at a time, come back and meet for a week and tell stories and then go back out again. Had a lot of fun. But I did that job for a year and I got bored with it. And I was ready to move on. You were much more patient. You stayed 1 more year. did your job. So I went in the military and had 6 months of active duty. Then I had 6 years of reserve. Oddly enough, I thought at the end of the 6 years reserve that I had uh, been excised out as a honorable discharge. Well, in doing my research on this, Jim, it was like 18 years later that they finally discharged me honorably. I just didn't, I mean, I was lost in the system for a variety of different reasons because I was all over the place, but still honorable discharge, which was a good thing. But you're right. So from there, I went to Baton Rouge to a bank. And I remember this was really my first job interview, and my dad set up the interview. Great bank, Louisiana National Bank, and I interviewed with several people, but the last guy was Chuck McCoy, who was the chairman. And great interview. Chuck offered me the job afterward, and being 22, 23 at the time, I had to play very cool business guy. And I said, well, Mr. McCoy, thank you for the opportunity, but let me think on it overnight and I'll get back to you tomorrow. I go home and my dad said, how'd it go? And I said, well, Dad, this is what happened. He said, son, this is the only time my dad ever gave me advice after I graduated. He said, son, get your rear end back to that bank and you accept that job. So I did that. And that was the only time he ever gave me advice, but I stayed there for 2 years. But the key thing there was I was in the management training program and I went through the analyst department, and we were always analyzing for about 3 to 4 months, small business loans. So I really learned how to read, and which is a key thing if you're going to be a small business entrepreneur. I could read a financial statement, P&Ls, the balance sheet. I learned that early in my career, which really helped me down the road. But I only stayed there a year and a half, realized it was not what I wanted to do. And thankfully, Jim got me an opportunity to interview with Abbott, got on with Abbott because Jim was in Baton Rouge where I was at the same time. And I got on a 6-month training program, the best sales training in the world. They were phenomenal. I was between Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta, and all the time telling them, I got to be in a big city, guys. And I'm married at this point to Debbie. And she's like, I can't go to Huntsville, Alabama. I need to be in a big city. So luckily we got into Atlanta, got the job, did that for a while, learned a great deal, but I learned early on, it just wasn't fit for me. A huge company. And at that time, after about a year and a half, you got headhunters calling you all the time. So this headhunter called me and offered me this opportunity with IDEX, small company, same diagnostics, but did it in the animal health field. So I took the job, which was actually a pay increase for me. And I'm embarrassed when I look at what I made then, and I look at what kids my age today are making. I'm like, God, we didn't make any money at all. But I took the job, and I was like the 80th or 90th employee when I joined. Very small company. I loved it because it taught me about entrepreneurship. Just being a small company, we could turn on a dime. We were competing against Eli Lilly in the field and other major corporations. And I was the Eastern Regional Sales Manager. And there was a woman, Kelly, who was the Western Regional Sales Manager. We only salespeople. We sold through a distribution channel, which taught me a lot. After a couple of years, we purchased an analyzer, a chemistry analyzer that we sold to vets, and we had to go direct. So I had to hire a sales force for the Eastern United States of 20 people, which I did. I enjoyed that, but I was learning at that time that I was getting bored. I was learning that my focus was 2 to 3 years and that I need a new project, even to the extent I put on that bio for you, Jim, that this was about 1990. I learned to follow one of my passions. My boss at the time was a reservist, and he had to go to the Gulf War. And so as I'm working, I decided, because my travel agent is an actor, he convinced me to try out for this play. I try out for the play, I get the lead role. And for about 3 to 4 months at night, I'm doing this and still working during the day, which was hard, but doing this at night, probably the most fun 3 months I've ever had in my life, just learning about myself. So needless to say, we were open for 2 weeks, and that was the run of the deal. And I wasn't any good, but I enjoyed it a great deal.
Hey, you had the lead role. You were doing something right. That's amazing.
I don't think anybody else wanted it, but I learned at that point in time that was one of my passions. which again, you're going to hear me constantly say, you got to be passionate about what you're doing, whether it's in the entrepreneurial world or even in the corporate world.
Absolutely.
So what happens at IDEX is we get this sales force going. I'm liking it. I'm kind of reinvigorated, but after a year or two, I start to lose my focus. I'm just not as enjoyed with it. And I think they recognize that too. And all of a sudden I'm becoming one of the older guys on the block at 32 or 33. So they made me an offer to go up to Maine.
Corporate headquarters, right?
Corporate headquarters to Portland, Maine, in a fabulous company. And if I was really being honest with myself at that time, which I can be now, they were exiling me up there. They didn't think that I would take that opportunity. They thought that I'd say, you know what, guys, thanks, but no thanks. I'm done. But I was scared to death, Jim. I've got a wife that's not working at home. I've got 2 children, 5 to 6. Like, what am I going to do? So I took it out of fear. And that was in about the May timeframe of, I don't know, was it 1992, 93 or so? And so I go up there and I am miserable because you are really under the spotlight. They got your thumb on you. It's the first guy in, the last guy out. Everybody's corporate, and that's not me. And I recognize that early on. And Debbie comes up because we've got to find a house. And she is miserable with the agent the entire day. We're going to be taking a step down in the home that we're going to be buying. So we finally get back to the hotel at the end of the day and she's crying. Once the door closes, she's like, Taylor, I can't do this. So I'm going, oh, that's a lot of great pressure on me right there. I'm not happy and I'm not telling her I'm not happy in the job at this point. So we decided to go get a drink. And we go to the bar, and the hotel is at the airport. And lo and behold, and I got to look at my date here. Lo and behold, this is June 17th, 1994. We're at the bar, and it's OJ and the Bronco. I've got my issues, but I'm looking at this guy. He's got a lot bigger issues than I have. But it's one of those things you can remember certain things that happened in your life at certain times. And so
I'll tell you, Taylor, hold on one second, because I think, what you're saying is very real out there. And I can tell you that I went through that same exact thing. I felt pressure to get promoted to go to corporate headquarters when I was at Abbott Labs. Didn't want to do it, right? It was made to feel like if I didn't do it, right, I was going to be blackballed and exiled and all this stuff. And so I did it. And it wasn't my wife crying, it was me crying up there. But the point of this to share with people is that, and you're going to kind of share what you did there is, man, don't do what you don't want to do. Don't be forced whatever into something, because it happens out there. People will do that to you. They will push you into places sometimes it's for their own gain, literally, not in the best interest of you. So really think about those things in corporate America, because I've seen it time and time and time and time again. And you'd be surprised how many people that they took a job and in 3-6 months, when I have my recruiting firm, they're calling me like, get me out of here, know? So, so I just want to emphasize that, because I think a lot of people sitting here can relate to that for sure.
Well, they can relate because it was May and I was scared to death. That's the only reason I took that job. And I told Debbie, that the reason I went, because honestly, I wasn't as forthright with her as I probably should have been, because I didn't want to scare her. I told her that the reason I'm doing this is because of the stock options that I received when I first got to IDEX. And they weren't a phenomenal amount, although when I look back today, I think I told you the other day, Jim, had I never exercised those stock options, it'd have been a hell of a payoff. But I did. But so I told her that's why I did it, and I went back, and then by the end of June, July, I'm not feeling it. We get our house in Atlanta under contract, and I go back to Atlanta because we're going to go down to Florida, where you are right now, for a vacation. We drive the 6 hours. And Debbie says, once we get there, she drove most of the way. She goes, I really need a drink. I said, oh no, I'm the one that needs a drink, and you need to sit down and listen to what I have to tell you. Because I basically said, Debbie, I can't go back. I said, I hate what I'm doing. And it took the whole weekend. We both cried about it. We finally came to the realization,
Yeah.
this is the best thing. I go
Yeah.
back to the corporate office up in Portland. And I basically, within the next day, I resigned to my boss's boss, who was Jeff Corley. And Jeff was a gentleman, to the extent that for whatever reason, Jeff gave me 9 months severance. I don't know why, but it was a great deal. I said, Jeff, thank you very much. And I left, got in my car, drove back to Atlanta. One of the most freeing experiences I have ever had,
Yeah.
because in that 3 month period, I went from scared to death to having an incredible amount of confidence, saying, you know what, I can do anything I want to do. It just took some time to grapple with that. But as I'm driving back to Atlanta, I call my dad. Now, this is the guy that's never given me any advice except that one time. And I call him and say, hey, Dad, I just wanted you to know, I've left my job. And he said, well, son, I'm sure that you've given it a lot of thought, et cetera. And he never said anything about it, but I know doggone well he's thinking, son, what the hell did you do?
Yeah.
I got a wife and 2 kids at home and I've got no job, but nonetheless, I go back, and what I'm doing at that point is trying to figure out, do I want to go back into corporate America, or do I really want to pursue my passion on my own? And it took about 2 to 3 months interviewing a bunch of companies, realizing that's not what I want to do. And a friend of a friend introduced me to some partners I ended up partnering with. And it was a hand car wash of all things, and that created problems for me down the road from an inferiority complex. I was in the car wash. We'll talk a little bit about that. But nonetheless, I started to really think about it, and it made sense because of my background. I was pretty anal. I loved cleaning. And I said, this makes sense if I can implement what I learned from the 3 companies I've been with. And they were all fabulous companies. And they taught me basically how to, in a simple way, destroy your competition. And I said, if I can do that, I can be successful in this business. So I met up with these guys. We formed a partnership, and it was a good thing. It took about 1.5 years, though, to get my location open. And during that 1.5 years, I'm learning about how to spot a piece of property that works, how to go through the zoning process, how to finance a business, all things I'd never been in touch with
before. Yeah.
So I'm recommending those that are looking to get into an entrepreneurial type of business. It's great, at least your first time, to have a mentor. They were phenomenal on that end. Now, while we were trying to build that location, my severance package is running out. And I finally went to my partner and said, look, I got it. Can you employ me? So he employs me in the car wash as what they call a fast lane junkie. I was literally washing cars by hand out there every day. And I was making $7 an hour plus tips. I'm 36, 37 years of age, got kids at home, my wife is starting to work at this time to help support what we're doing. But it was a little demoralizing, but it was a fast lane junkie. That's what they called us, because several of the guys that were out there working also were physicians who were going through rehab programs. So it wasn't like there weren't any other bright guys in there. So that was comforting to know to some degree. But, a funny story or two, and that is, one day I'm working behind the counter, processing guys getting their cars washed, $10, $15. And all of a sudden I look up, and there's this guy I know from college, Tripp. And his name just rolled right off my tongue. I said, hey, Tripp, how you doing? So we talked for about 3 or 4 minutes. He takes his stuff and he leaves. And I know doggone well Tripp leaves thinking, boy, Taylor's 36 and he has fallen on some times. So I go home and I relate the story to Debbie, and she goes, Taylor, I'd have been humiliated. I would have told him what I was doing. I'm trying to partner. I said, honey, I didn't have time to do that. I really don't care, because I knew what my end game was. I said, I'm going to be successful, and I'm going to get there. Right. Yeah. So, we keep doing this. I've got friends that are helping me because they're letting me paint their kitchens, their bathrooms, whatever, paying me to do it. Another story was that, Debbie and I, she was doing all this faux painting on walls, and I was her do boy. I would help her do whatever to make money. So
make a buck.
We're at a place called Chateau Alon. And this is a place up in North Georgia. and we're doing a job that she has no idea what she's doing. I have no idea. And we take a break. We go in the backyard. We've got our bag lunches, and literally we look at each other, and we couldn't have been happier. We're not making any money. We're struggling. She doesn't know what's going to happen. But it was a defining moment that we were both just happy. So you got to stop and smell the roses as you're going through this. But so we finally get our place open. We do it for a couple of years. We're very successful. And again, all of a sudden, it's 2.5 years in, I'm starting to get a little bored. I think I'm good at managing. I love the development side. My partners come to me and they say, hey, you've done well. We'd like to, expand. We'd like you to do the expansion, finance it, manage it, do the whole thing. And I'm thinking, well, and what are y'all going to do? Didn't make sense to me. Long story short is I asked them to buy me out, and they did, which was a great thing. So that was kind of a 2 to 3 year deal. And I had an attorney. His name was Ugo Ippolito. I always got these funny names in there. And Ugo was a guy that represented me well, but I remember I was trying to negotiate his fee, and it was ridiculous. And I said, Ugo, I mean, that's a ridiculous fee. And he said, Taylor, he said, you can go to a bunch of these other guys that, they're going to charge you half the amount, but they don't have the experience I have that I can get it done in half the amount of time they do. So he convinced me, which kind of goes back to a credo I've always had, which is, a man's got to know his limitations. It wasn't something that I could do and do well, but I trusted him. And that played well for me as I go on through my career, and the people that I identify, whether it's a CPA or a banker, that's not my area of expertise. Trust them, but you got to find the right people to do it. So I part ways with them, and we sign a non-compete. And they never thought that I would stay in the car wash business, but my location was about 20 miles from my home, and I'd already started scouting out places that were 5 miles from my home. So it was outside the non-compete area. And this is when I really start envisioning what I want to accomplish, and as a kid, I was an artist. So I would literally sit there listening to, I was a fan of opera. I'd sit in the basement, listen to opera, and I'm drawing out my location, what it's going to look like, et cetera. And we come up with this design because we want to have that product that we can differentiate from others, that we can create that want to satisfy the need. We know the target audience is women. And so we create this hybrid car wash that is a tunnel, which we didn't have a tunnel before. And you got a couple guys in the tunnel, but some other equipment. But we also have this beautiful retail area that we're selling $200 and $300 topiaries to women, furniture, et cetera. That was the draw to bring them in. And it was beautifully decorated, beautifully landscaped. And it worked beautifully. But I wanted to do more. And I realized that my concept, I couldn't duplicate it or replicate it the way it was. I had 30 employees. It was too hard to manage. And at that time, there was this express concept that was starting to take hold in Georgia and some other states. And another buddy of mine who was in the chemical business, Zeev Jossman, he was with Blue Coral. He was looking to start his own chemical company. We go up to the Northeast. We start doing our research. And we come back, he starts his own company. I start a new express model while I still have mine and I'm trying to sell it. And I also pick up a partner at this time who happens to be a good friend. And he comes from a business where he married his wife, whose father owned the business, very, very successful. And I think he felt over time that, people judged him because he was the father-in-law. He was the son-in-law of the father, type deal. And so he wanted to be successful on his own. He wanted to commit with me, and it was his money. His wife didn't want him to do it, but he decided to do it. So we start the express business. And the thing about the express business was I still had the same target audience, but I reduced my labor by half because I only needed 2 or 3 people. Everything was totally automated. We had all free vacuums. And this was all taken, I don't know if you remember Benny's in Baton Rouge when you were there. Benny's goes back to the 1940s, and they had evolved. He was the guy that pioneered this whole concept.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
It just was coming to
the startup. Yeah.
The startup. So, I'm thinking about all this. I start to go find the financing, and most of my financing was done through the SBA. That's what I learned from my former partners, and that worked well for me. It's expensive, but it allowed us to leverage and do the deals right.
Right.
So we got that first one located in Hiram, Georgia, and I built a barn. The key thing for me was my partner Jamie and I, we wanted to build a brand that was recognizable. Not far from where I live, there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken that we called the Big Chicken. It was Kentucky Fried, but this chicken was 200 feet tall, and everybody used it as a landmark. So we wanted to create a landmark type thing. So we created a barn, and we put a lot of money into landscaping because my target audience was women. And they came, we did incredibly well. We financed a second location from the profits of that one. And over about a 12-year period, I was opening new locations every 2 years. And we toyed with the idea of franchising, but that was outside of my wheelhouse. And at the time, unfortunately, I was thinking, well, these things all need to be 8 and 10 miles apart. Today, 15, 18 years later, they're on every corner. So I missed the mark there. I look back, but we were very successful. We opened all these locations. And in the end, one of my last locations, though, was we thought we were golden, Jim. This is your classic entrepreneurial mindset. I couldn't do any wrong. Well, we find this location. It was the only one that had been a former car wash. So we got it for a steal, we thought, and in the end, I didn't pay. I should have paid a lot less. It was an area that was coming back. To make a long story short, after about 3 years, we'd been losing money every month. We'd been robbed a couple of times. It just wasn't the greatest area, even though it looked great. We had a lot of money in it. Finally, I made the decision, and I should have made it earlier, that we had to negotiate with the bank and give it back to them. In the end, we lost probably $1 million, and I should have done it earlier. But we finally got rid of that location, and then we had opened up another one. And about a year after that, I decided, I'm nearing 55, 56. I want to go ahead and figure out what my true exit strategy was. And so my partners and I sat down, and we decided we've got to really streamline our costs and run that top line however we can. And we did that. And about a year before we did our exit strategy, or ended up getting out, a company out of Arizona approached me. They came in and said, "We love what you're doing." They entertained me all day. And at the end of the deal, they made an offer to me. And it was kind of a ridiculous offer. And I was embarrassed they even made the offer. So I never even responded. And they never got back with me. So a year later, I finally call a guy. This is my guy, Vinny. I have Ugo, and then Vinny is a broker. Again, I didn't know how to sell my business. So
sell a business.
I get Vinny involved. He comes in, we meet with my CPA in a day. And he says, "Taylor, based on your numbers, I think this is what we can do." And I said, "Vinny, if we can do that, why are we sitting here? Let's go." And we did that. And within 3 weeks, we had 3 offers. Lo and behold, the best offer we had was from the company that had offered it to me a year before. But because Vinny was involved, I almost did twice what they offered me. That's what he was able to bring to the party that I couldn't have brought. So he was worth every dime I paid him, every dime I paid the attorneys. And in the end, that happened in May. We ended up closing the deal on the 16th of October in 1916. One of the happiest days. We threw a huge party for about 50 friends, plus our attorneys, the bankers, and had an incredible time. And then I basically called it quits for 2 years. I said, I'm just going to kick back and relax. But most entrepreneurs get a little edgy. They are ready to get going. So that's when I decided, or Debbie wanted me to go ahead and get my real estate license. But there's a funny story with that. Both my daughters growing up, and this is a funny thing that, both my daughters, they said when they were growing up with my mom, their mom in real estate, "I would never do that job, Mom." Well, they both graduate and they say, "Mom, I think I want to go in real estate." Well, so they both go in real estate about 3 years apart. And Jordan does it. And after about 2 or 3 years, she gets married and she leaves. And then Catherine comes in. She comes in, does it for 2 or 3 years, and she leaves because she gets married. So when I decided to do it, Debbie said there's just one condition. She said, you
You
can't
can't
leave
leave.
me. Right. So
Oh,
we've been doing that and having a great time, but you know,
yeah. So, let me ask you about this because you retire, right? And then you get into the family business that Debbie's, so everybody knows out there. Debbie built, probably one of the top, well, not probably, one of the top real
she's done a
estate
very good
firms in
business.
Atlanta. Yeah, great business, right? And so now you go to work with your wife, okay? you know, that's difficult for a lot of people. So how do you, what would you say to people who are thinking about going into family business, working with a spouse or whatever? Because you guys have done it extraordinarily well, right? What have you done? Because a lot of people just, they'll tear each other's heads off, right? And,
You know,
and I've seen that time and time again.
it's much like, our marriage was, which is you got to know your role, and we
Yeah.
always were pitching in,
Yeah.
helping each other. I took the
Yeah.
garbage out.
That's great.
She did this. I actually
Yeah.
the vacuuming, which was one of the things I did long before I got in the car wash business. She says, vacuuming is kind of good for you. That the car wash business might work. So we knew our roles, and in this,
Yeah.
she made it very clear that as long as I'm the boss. So, and I'm the kind of guy that I'm a backbencher. I've always loved Newt Gingrich, and he was the best at his best when he was throwing it from the back bench. And that's how I am. I don't need
Yeah.
to be out front and center. So I said, honey, this is going to work great. Now that I've got my license, I can do everything she does so that she
Yeah.
can travel to see my kids in Louisiana and New York. It
And you
just
can watch the
happened.
business.
I didn't tell you this, but she was supposed to be in New York today. And unfortunately, we had some family members come over yesterday, and one of the kids called her today as I was taking her to the airport and said, Debbie, he's 20. He said, I just was, positive for COVID. So she couldn't go see Georgia in New
Oh,
York because she's pregnant. So
oh,
Debbie's
yeah.
a little
Yeah.
depressed about that.
Yeah.
But I was going to manage the business while she's gone. And right now,
Yeah.
probably just like it is in Florida or Denver, the real estate market is so incredibly hot for the sellers. We have no inventory at all.
Right.
And it
Right.
makes it very difficult, but we're busy. It's a lot of fun. And I think our objective is to do this for 2 or 3 more years. And,
Yeah.
I've got a long-term, the other day I tried to forecast out to I was 1995. The entrepreneur in me is constantly looking, reevaluating where I am, where I'm going,
Right. Right.
especially on the numbers side. And I said, if I can do this at 1995, if we cannot touch our nest egg for another year or two, we've got it made. So that's kind of
Right.
the plan.
Right.
Unlike many of the people you've had on your speaker bureau that are a lot more aggressive, dynamic than me. I'm looking to kind of edge out.
No, but honestly though, I think about, Brian, who was an entrepreneur that was on here. We had Mark Smits early on who left corporate world. Now he's got this winery that he started at 60 something years old. Right. And a couple others. And the thing that's in common, and I would say this to everybody, and I know this from my experience as well. It's, I'm in this because I'm absolutely passionate about what I'm doing. Right.
Correct.
I absolutely believe that what we do changes people's lives to the good. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a car wash, if it's a career company, if it's a winery. It's something that you gotta love going to work, and then you're
Agreed.
not going to work, and then you don't mind working hard, and that is the theme that I keep hearing, because every 3 or 4 I'll have somebody that's an entrepreneur just share their story, and I think you've exemplified that clearly, and I think the other thing you've done, Taylor, too, is that you've got a plan, like you're thinking through things, you're looking at the numbers. And the other thing that's really clear that I think is so spot on is you surrounded yourself with people who knew areas of the business that you didn't know, right? Or weren't very good at. And
Right.
you found the right ones that you could trust. You paid them well, but in return, right? You just gave that example. You sold, and I know it's for a lot of money, I don't know how much, but all those car washes for double, same people from a year earlier that offered you half that. I
And
mean,
that's
and you give
because
a
I'm
lot of
right on
credit
the
to the
guy.
broker,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
all that stuff. So no, but I'm gonna I'm going to get into questions because I know we got only 10 minutes here,
Yeah.
but it's just, first of all, I want to say I've had a couple of comments people made that came in, and all of them say the same thing. I'm going to read this one though. It says, Taylor, I love your honesty. Thank you for sharing your unique personal story, and that it all doesn't have to look perfect all the time. And here's a question. Now this is a great question. We're talking about this one. For someone that's interested in real estate, what do you recommend as a first step? Because I know a lot of people are thinking about real estate right now, a lot, right? And what would be a first step that you would say to them?
Okay, so my first step, and I did try it shortly after I sold my companies. I tried it online. You could either do the courses online, at least in Georgia, or you could go to a class. The problem with the class for me was early on that you had to devote 2 solid weeks. You could never take, I mean, you couldn't miss more than 30 minutes.
You couldn't do anything else. Yeah.
And we were traveling to see the kids, could never make it happen. I tried it online. Like I said early on, my ADD was so bad, Jim, I could not sit still.
Couldn't do it.
You know, after 6 months, Debbie said, well, Taylor, how far along are you on this? I said, well, I'm on chapter 2. And she knew it wasn't going to happen. So that's one of the ways is to go through the courses online. In Georgia.
And you're talking about getting your real estate license
correct.
in a particular state. Yeah.
You know, it's not expensive. Like this was a Barney Fletcher course. They were one of the premier guys in Georgia, and other states do it. So just take the course, spend the money.
Yeah.
Look, in order to be successful, you got to spend money. You know what? You got to make the investment. It may not work, but if you don't take it, and that comes back to one last thing that I didn't mention as my pillar of success. And this comes back to the first guy that hired me, the guy at the bank, Chuck McCoy. And Chuck had given me this quote that has served me incredibly well. And he kind of, he bastardized a little bit the old Patton quote, which said that, you know, a good decision made timely is much better than a great decision made too late. And you've got to take action. So for me, it was about taking not only action,
take a shot,
but it's massive action, because if you don't do it, there's no corporate group around you to say, well, I'll do it if Taylor's not going to do it. So for those guys who are going to get in real estate, try the course and see
how if it interests you.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I know they're pretty reasonable. The ones online, I think, are $1,000, and
I think it was $395, like $495. It wasn't bad.
That's not bad.
So
that's not bad. Let me get. I got another. Oh, this is a good one. If you can go back and go ahead.
To your first person's comment, I wasn't always so honest with myself. Like when I left IDEX, I was probably fired from that job. And I kind of deluded myself in thinking that it just wasn't working out. But as I'm analyzing it today, it freaking fired me. Best thing that ever happened to me. But you got to be honest with yourself and constantly be self-evaluating. But go ahead.
Yeah. This is an old boss of yours.
Oh,
seriously. So proud of the success you have had over your long careers. He's talking to both of us because I worked for the same guy too. Thanks for sharing your stories, Chuck. Okay. Isn't that great? Oh, that's wonderful. What's that?
Give Chuck my number. And for Chuck,
I will do it.
You know what? I told you I had inferiority complexes over, again, I was very unconventional, so I'm hoping that somebody out there can really, it resonates with them that if this guy can do it, I can do it. I always felt that I disappointed Chuck. And I probably did, but I loved him. He was a great guy, and so I'd love to reconnect with him.
We'll make that happen.
Okay.
Here's another one. We'll have a couple more questions here. If you could go back and do something different in your career, would you change anything?
When I did that play, I would have pursued that a little more, with a little more vigor. Afterwards, I was 30. I was 30. I told you that the other day. I was 30, but I was thinking, oh, I'm way too old. I could have done it. And I wasn't all that good then, but I tell you, I had the taste of it and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You've mentioned that to me. Yeah. Well, you know what, but Taylor, you actually got a taste of it though. You actually did something, got a lead role and, for playing Atlanta. I guarantee there's a lot of people say, I wish I would have done something. Right. And so So that's neat. Great answer. And then this last one is, I love this last one. It's probably coming from Debbie herself, even though she told you she's in the other room. It says, what have you learned most from Debbie working for Debbie?
She's the boss.
That's a great question.
Yeah, probably she did do it. You know, she's incredibly talented. She's very hard on herself. And I've got to constantly say, honey, you know, very motivated and focused. And at times I've got to bring her back to say, honey, you know, we got two great kids. I mean, this deal didn't happen, but you know, the world's going to open up again tomorrow. The sun's going to come up, and she's very good at what she does. And she makes my job easier, but it's not easy working with your spouse. It isn't, but I've done it for the last 15 years because I was doing it behind the scenes.
I'll tell you what, I think it's great you're working with her. I've always thought I'd love to work with Sherry, but we both know it's impossible. It just won't work, and we don't go there because we know that. So
okay, Jim, well, just one last little funny story about that. So when we were back in the day where she was working to make money for us and we were doing the faux finishing, she had a job up in North Georgia. And this was a job, I don't know how she'd gotten it, but she was supposed to do this Harlequin, which is kind of a diamond painting on a floor in a kitchen. And really and I'll go up to help her out. And we only have one day to do it because they're getting ready to refinish the floors the next day. And I go up to help her. And in the end, as soon as I get there, I realize that this is a mathematical problem, you know, and I got to use algebra to figure it out. Well, we get there at about 8 a.m. I kid you not, it's 2 to 3 in the afternoon. She's crying. We haven't done diddly squat. And finally I said, honey, I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to come back. By 4 o'clock, I'd kind of figured it out. We laid it out you basically got to take blue painter's tape and do your diamonds. We made it happen. By midnight, we finished the job. I couldn't walk for the next 2 days because I was bent over. My back was killing me. And that was $1,750. It was an incredibly difficult job. And the funny thing was that 3 months later, they call us back because the builder didn't do the finish work the way he should have, and they wanted it redone. And they repaid us to do it, but all the Harlequin was already there. So it took us half. It was a great deal. But as an entrepreneur, you do what you got to do.
Yeah. Here's the last thing I want to say here. This is from a gal who wrote in. She said, how can I connect with Taylor to ask him a few questions? She's from corporate America. She's starting a new business. He's reading my mind. Can I please talk to him? So I'll tell you what, Charlene, go ahead and let me give you my cell phone. I don't care. Everybody can have it. 303-204-1233. And then what I'll do, again, 303-204-1233. And go ahead and text me. I'll have yours. And then what I'll do is I'll forward Taylor's.
And Taylor, I'll give her a buzz and I'll be glad. You know, if I can mentor and help somebody in that regards now, I mean, that's fulfilling to me. So
that's awesome. Well, Taylor, thank you a ton. You made it. You did it.
Was not looking for.
And I got to tell you, I got to say this. Taylor was so nervous about this. He's telling me he's not sleeping at night, you know, because this is just not what he does.
It's not out of my
Taylor,
wheel.
The best thing about you is it's you, it's your story, and it will resonate. And I'm seeing that with some of these comments with the people who are on here. So thank you a ton for that. And let me go ahead and get back to this here, and I wanted how do I? Okay, so it won't advance. There we go. Did the questions? I should have been on there. And let me tell you who our next industry expert webinar is, and his name is Bob Brody. And Bob was with me at my recruiting firm for 13 years, and I passed on the recruiting firm to Bob. He is my former college roommate. Incredible guy. And he has taken the recruiting firm that I had and the people I had and taken it and done an incredible job with it beyond what we had built it up prior to that. And I'll tell you, he's going to share with you about external recruiters, how do you work with them? How do you get the most out of them? How do you find them? All these little things and nuances and understanding of it. I guarantee most people don't know. 95% of the people don't know. Because I remember when I went into the recruiting business, I thought I knew it all. And man, when I got into it, I may have known 50% of what I was doing. So Bob's going to be on next April 7th. You'll find this very fascinating, very interesting. If you're in corporate America, you are getting calls from recruiters all the time, right? How do I know which ones are good, right? How do I get them to call me back? Why aren't they calling me back, right? And how do I work with the great ones, and how can I utilize them to get into a new job and all that I'd really like to do. So that's going to be great. And I'm excited to have Bob on there. He's a lifelong great friend as well. So I'm blessed to have all these folks on it. So Taylor, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody that was on here, and look forward to next month with you as well. So good night, everybody.
Thanks, Jim.
Good night, Taylor.